For those that believe that bowl games simply don't matter, they haven't watched a single bowl game in their entire lifetime. How about some of the bowl games that we got early in this week? We had some great ones, and for those that are advocating for less bowl games, these are the type of bowl games that would be first to be cut off the list. How about the amazing comeback by Western Kentucky in the famous Toastery Bowl, coming back 21 unanswered late in the game, able to get a game-winning field goal and some special teams play as well. Western Kentucky wins the famous Toastery Bowl. How about in the Frisco Bowl as well? Another bowl game that likely would have been cut if we had less bowl games, if we moved in that direction. We had the sons of Josh McCown and Chad Pennington go at it against each other. UTSA wins that one. They get their first bowl win in school history. And then finally, a huge surprise out of the Boca Raton Bowl. How about a 45-0 win against Syracuse in the Boca Raton Bowl? We were hugely surprised. We thought Syracuse was going to win and cover. Boy, were we wrong. So shout out to USF for proving us wrong and getting an emphatic win to end their 2023 campaign. Plus, we have a Gasparilla Bowl coming up too, and we talked about that in the last podcast. If you want to see that preview of the Gasparilla Bowl, go ahead and check out one of the cards are going to be on one of these two sides. Don't know which side it goes to, but you'll figure it out. You guys are pretty smart, right? Welcome to the Any Given Saturday podcast as we continue our bowl coverage of the 2023 bowl season. It's been a really fun bowl season. It's been really fun to see all these bowl games happen all at one single time. We are going to be blessed here today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm recording this on a Friday morning. We're going to have 7 bowl games tomorrow, and I'm so excited about postseason football really being in full swing for the college level. Really good appetizer for some of the bigger bowl games that are going to be happening later on down the line, shortly after that Christmas holiday for those of you that do choose to support and celebrate that Christmas holiday, because we don't always celebrate the same things. But we have all that coming up shortly, and I hope you guys stay around for the whole thing, because it's going to be a good one, man. So make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you have to be brand new, because you do really have an opportunity to be that A1 since day one. Y'all have a real chance to do that. That would really make my heart smile if you join this little community that we're trying to build over here on Any Given Saturday. But first, we got to go ahead and talk about this elephant in the room, so to speak. So I was getting ready for the show, like getting ready to start this podcast, get the recording started, all that good stuff. And while I was getting everything together, a ESPN notification popped up on my phone. So of course, we went ahead and checked it out. And what do we end up finding? We find that Florida State is suing the ACC for their entire exit fee, and they're just overall just really discontent right now with what's going on in college football right in this very moment. This has been a huge change from what we have seen from what is going on. They have just reached a crossroads, so it makes you wonder, what's the next? What's the next thing for Florida State? I saw this coming from a million miles away. It was something that they were already considering before the season started, and things died down eventually. Florida State and Clemson both stayed in the ACC, at least for this season, so things died down for now. But then you see what happens in the regular season. Florida State had an amazing season. They truly did. They had a truly excellent season, and they go 13-0. They went undefeated. They do everything that they're supposed to do. They scheduled a tough outer conference. They scheduled LSU, for example. They go undefeated in their own conference, a solid conference. Matter of fact, we actually did have the ACC as one of our best leagues in college football this year. They were our third best league going into the bowl season. Syracuse getting blown out doesn't help that, but we might readjust after the bowl season is over. But that being said, The ACC was a really good league this year, in my opinion. We had this as the third best league. So when we saw Florida State left down to college football playoff because of their alleged, oh, they don't have the roster, like so to speak, to win a national championship. Um, they were left out because of the Jordan Travis injury. That I've always felt like that was the first domino that fell. Like ever since the day that was announced that Alabama was going to get into the college football playoff instead of Florida State. Now, that's not to say that Alabama didn't deserve to get in at all. We talked about this in length in a previous podcast. I thought Alabama also had a compelling argument, but to make a long story short, we believe that while Alabama had a compelling argument, we thought that Florida State was more deserving. And that's really what sports is all about at the end of the day. It's supposed to be about more deserving. But Camellia made their decision, and unfortunately, we have to live with the ramifications of that decision. And unfortunately, we might be seeing one of those ramifications play out right in front of our eyes. Florida State has basically reached a crossroad with the ACC. If a undefeated conference champion out of the ACC is not going to be respected enough to get into a college football playoff spot, could we start to see the potential downfall of the ACC? I felt that this was coming ever since we saw that result of Florida State being left out. And we're already seeing two super conferences. You got the Big Ten, you have the SEC on another hand. And while the Big 12 is trying to rearm itself, and they've done a solid job of rearming themselves, they don't have any of the top flight programs in the country right now, at least within the Big 12. Should be a fun conference, but do we expect anyone from the Big 12 to compete for a national championship in the long term? Many people will say no. I'm more of a wait and see kind of person. But Florida State and maybe Clemson as well have a tough decision to make. Do they join the SEC or do they try to join the Big Ten? Does the SEC want to expand to a 17 or 18 team conference in the near future? I mean, these are all questions that will need to be played out over the next few days. But it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it's come down to this. We've already seen the dissolution of the Pac-12. The Pac-12, the last stand is right before our eyes. After the national championship game, the Pac-12 will cease to exist. Maybe it will come back one day, but next season, the Pac-12 will no longer be around. Is the ACC going in that particular direction? Because all it takes is one domino. Remember in the Pac-12, when we saw things playing out. In the previous season, we saw UCLA and USC being the first teams to leave. They decided that, hey, we want to be a part of the Big Ten. Okay, that stinks, but hey, you still got Oregon, you still got Washington, you still have all of these quality programs out on the West Coast. It's going to hurt, but you guys will survive as long as nobody else leaves. Well, then, shortly after, maybe a year later, we see Oregon and Washington also announce that they're going to leave the Pac-12 in order to join the Big Ten. And that's when we see all these other dominoes fall. Various other schools looking to leave for possible greener pastures. Colorado, Arizona State going towards the Big 12 conference. You also have Cal and Stanford. Instead of trying to stick things out in the Pac-12, they're going to end up going to the ACC. And so it just leaves Oregon State and Washington State essentially as football independents. The Pac-12 will technically exist on paper, but for all intents purposes, Oregon State and Washington State are going to be left behind in this college football realignment. So Florida State, could they be the USC or UCLA? Could Florida State and Clemson be those two schools that will bolt? In my opinion, they should leave for the SEC. It would make more geographical sense. We always believe if you are going to leave your conference for a different conference, it should also always be based on geographical realignments, in my opinion, right? Because I see things as this. There is more to college athletics than just football. And while football programs have no problem traveling across the country, not everybody is given the opportunity to have those kind of resources. You got to think about some of the other schools, sports teams that are at your institution that may have to travel on bus or have crappier um, accommodations, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So if Florida State and Clemson, for the sake of this argument, does leave, I think it would make sense to leave the SEC from a geographical standpoint so that at least the other sports don't have to travel and you can maintain your rivalries with Miami. You could also maintain your rivalry with Florida. That would become like an in-conference rivalry game that we wouldn't mind watching. But it's a tough day for college football. And, when something that I unfortunately saw coming, but I would not be surprised by the end of this decade if the ACC is no longer relevant in college football. We're trending in a direction to where we're going to have two big conferences. And it makes me think about the comments by Chip Kelly, where Chip Kelly thinks that there should be a commissioner for college football, and then there should be a separate entity for all the other college sports because college football is truly a different animal. There's a lot more money to be thrown around in college football than in any other sport. If, like, for example, like the Oregon and Washington thing, if their football teams want to go play in the Big Ten, that's fine. But their other sports shouldn't have to travel across the country for a conference game. You think the volleyball team is going to get those same type of accommodations that their football team is going to get? That's a long road trip from Seattle, Washington to Piscataway, New Jersey. That is a long way to go for a team that's allegedly in your same conference. So it's something that I think about a lot. But unfortunately, the College Football Playoff Committee may have not been the first domino to fall. This has been something that's been working for a long time, at least this past offseason. But if the ACC does fall apart, which it's definitely at a crossroads at a conference right now, then you're looking at that moment where Florida State was left out as an undefeated team out of the college football playoff. You're looking at that moment and you're saying that right there was the nail to the coffin. So that's just kind of my raw thoughts on it. I definitely wanted to talk about it real quick, given that this just was announced this morning as I was preparing the show. It's my raw thoughts. I'm sure I'm not alone on this, but we're gonna see how this develops as time goes on. So all the doom and gloom out of the way, though, we'll worry about all that stuff in the offseason. Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about in the offseason. But right now, it's bowl season, and it's been a fun bowl season. We have been blessed with 7 different games that are going to be happening on Saturday. And I'm ecstatic, man. I'm just simply excited for the opportunity. Let's go ahead and preview all 7 games here of bowl season. So go ahead, get yourself comfortable. We're going to go ahead and deep dive into these bowl games and give our prediction at the very end as well. So we're going to start things out. So there's actually 2 games that are starting at the same time tomorrow at noon. We'll go in alphabetical order based on the station that they're on. So one game is on ABC and the other game is on ESPN. This is both at noon, by the way. We'll take some time first and foremost to talk about the ABC game that's happening at noon. And that will be your 76 Birmingham Bowl. The company is called 76. That's who's sponsoring this bowl game. The Birmingham Bowl should be an exciting one. We'll have one of the better group of 5 teams in the country in the Troy Trojans. They are going to be taking on the Duke Blue Devils out of the ACC, and this is going to be a really interesting case of who has a culture that is going to outlast their head coach longer, right? So Duke's head coach has left for the opportunity to coach at Texas A&M, and then Troy's head coach, he left as well. He left for Tulane. So neither head coach is going to be coaching in this bowl game. Both of them are interim coaches. Duke does have a head coach in place in Manny Diaz, coming from Penn State. He was a defensive coordinator there over the course of this season. While Troy, I believe Troy is doing their head coaching search still. I don't believe Troy has named a head coach. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments section. Let's talk about the game at hand. So right now, what we have here is Troy is favored over the Duke Blue Devils. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about this Power 5 team first. That's had a solid regular season. And then we'll talk about these favorites in the Troy Trojans. So we go to the underdogs first and foremost. How does Duke end up winning this game? What does that scenario look like? So we know Duke is going to be in that transitional period as we wait for the Manny Diaz era to start. And it's always tricky when you have a new head coach in place. We saw this as Syracuse. Syracuse won't have some exciting things this upcoming season, this upcoming offseason. They looked like a team that was in limbo, while Southern Florida, their coaching staff was more intact, and that showed in the Boca Raton Bowl. Luckily, both teams seem to be dealing with that, so it's going to be real interesting to see who handles that a little bit better. That's going to be more on the players to be leaders. Who's the more player-led team is the $1 million question. Because for Duke, Mike Elko is gone for Texas A&M. But that's not the only key loss. The quarterback, Riley Leonard, he is also not going to be playing in this bowl game as well because he has entered the transfer portal. He's at Notre Dame. He's going to be at Notre Dame next season. And there's also a boatload of other Blue Devils that are going to be in the transfer portal. So for all intents and purposes, they are going to not have many of their key guys in this game. However, when Troy while they have been consistent all season long, they have been a terrific team this season. Detroit Trojans have played two particularly strong teams, James Madison and Kansas State. Those two games were both losses, and those were games where the Troy offense couldn't even get past 14 points. And when Riley Leonard was hurt, Duke was able to avoid a complete collapse because they were able to rely on that defense. Now, will their offense come out and hang 45 on the board? Probably not, because this Troy defense is also pretty good as well. It will at least be enough for Troy to prevent the other team from taking control and owning the time of possession. Troy will have a good pass rush, and there's more than enough pressure coming to keep anyone in the backfield from getting comfortable. But that being said, their offensive front is a strength. Their offensive front is a particularly strong offensive front, and that will be important for whoever is going to be starting for the Duke Blue Devils in this upcoming matchup. As of right now, it does seem like the quarterback that they will likely run out there will be Grayson Loftus. He's a freshman. He's a true freshman. And in the 5 games that he appeared in, he's played some solid games. He's played some solid football. Last time he led them against Pitt. They won 30-19, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. While he doesn't put up eye-popping stats, his completion percentage is barely above 50%. He has done enough to win these games and at least rely on the defense to go out and do their job as well. So if you're Duke, as long as Grayson Loftus is that game manager, you don't have to be the hero, so to speak, but manage the game. Don't be the reason why your team loses, and play good complementary football. The ground game for Duke needs to average over 5 yards a carry. You got to get that run game going. And conversely, if you're the defense for Duke, Troy is predicated on that running game. You keep the Trojans from getting 150 yards on the ground. You keep that score a little bit on the low side. You keep it tight throughout. You can give yourself a chance to win. Because when Duke does play extremely well on defense, you keep teams from 380 yards of total offense, you keep them from getting to that milestone, you're 5-0. And Troy has failed to do that a few times, 4 times, but 2 of those were against those stronger opponents, James Madison and Kansas State. However, that's where we get to how Troy can come out and win this game. Because if Troy can generate any sort of offense, Duke is going to be in some trouble in this game. Because while it's not like the Blue Devils can't do anything offensively, but they have struggled with their downfield passing game themselves. Their overall air attack, and this is even with Riley Leonard playing, it was one of the worst in the ACC. They were second to last. And besides the North Carolina game, because rivalry games are always a little bit on the weird side, this team isn't built to crank up the points in a firefight. So for Troy, it's very simple. Get this to a little bit more of a shootout. Stylistically, Troy would be favored in that kind of situation. Yes, the Duke offensive line is good in pass protection, but that doesn't always translate into overall production. Meanwhile, the Troy pass rush is one of the best among the nation, at least from a statistical standpoint. They know how to get to this quarterback, and it's a big reason why their defense is extremely good on third downs, which that could be a huge problem for the Blue Devil attack, especially if you get them into third and medium, third and long situations. So to keep hammering this, it's just going to be about Troy's ability to get a few points on the board. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to talk about a padlock stat, a key stat to look at. Duke has yet to win this season when their defense has allowed more than 21 points. And half the time, that's exactly what happened. They're 1-5 when they give up more than 20, but 21 specifically, they haven't won a single game. They're 0-5 in that regard. And this is where those losses to the portal and the opt-outs, they're going to matter. They'll be okay in the starting 11, Duke will, but they're going to have a depth issue. And if Troy is able to control the time possession, they're able to crank out long, methodical drives, you could really wear down the depth of Duke's defensive front. So for Troy, it's simple. You got to be methodical. Turnovers and penalties, they haven't been a problem. You have to make sure you play a relatively good game. Maybe at most 1 turnover. Got to also have a good balance and keep trying out different things to see what works. There's going to be something that Duke will struggle with, and when you find that, if you do find it, you got to exploit it. Sometimes the best thing that you can do as an offensive coordinator is just continue to do something if it works. It's what Michigan did in their game against Penn State. Penn State had a hard time stopping the run. Michigan just kept with that running game the entire second half. And while it wasn't the prettiest win back then, it was the most surefire way that team could win with an interim head coach. So, the model believes in Duke a little bit more than what Vegas does. Vegas has a 7.5 point line, while our line is only a field goal. I think the Duke players on this team have a lot of pride, but I do agree that the depth is going to be an issue. It could be a defensively battle kind of game. Could be where winner just has to score 24 points. If the winner gets to 24, you got nothing to worry about, right? So I think because Troy will have a little bit more depth, I think Troy will come out. They're going to win this game, but Duke's going to put up a fight. I don't think Duke is going to not cover. So to recap for the Birmingham Bowl, we got Troy winning this game outright, but we are going with Duke covering that plus 7.5. So Duke will likely lose in our eyes, but I think it will be a 1-possession game. It will certainly be very close. And speaking of those close games, we might have another close game on our hands. The other close game that we have that's going to be happening at noon, or at least it might be close, is that Camellia Bowl between Arkansas State and Northern Illinois. Now, if you don't like the Troy and Duke game on ABC. This game is going to be on the main ESPN station around noon tomorrow. This is happening down in Montgomery, Alabama, by the way. How about Arkansas State going to a bowl game? We did not see this coming at all. Remember in the very beginning of the season, Arkansas State, they were just getting bamboozled. They were getting manipulated. They were getting thrashed all over the place in the month of September. We remember this Arkansas State team being blown out by Oklahoma, and Butch Jones looks like he had like tears on the sideline. It was a real cringy moment, to be honest. And then they get thrashed again by Memphis, but it's a long season. And Arkansas State, give them all the credit in the world. They go 6-4 in those final 10 games. And here's Arkansas State, bowl eligible. They're going to be taking on a solid Northern Illinois team out of the MAC conference. That's who they get the opportunity to rock and roll with, is the Northern Illinois Huskies in this particular bowl game, in this particular matchup. Butch Jones, he is certainly no stranger in going to bowl games whatsoever. This is actually the fourth separate team that he has actually taken to a bowl game. He's also taken Central Michigan to a bowl game, my Cincinnati Bearcats to a bowl game, and of course the Tennessee Volunteers all to a bowl game as well. But then Northern Illinois, they haven't been good in bowl games. 4-10 in bowl games. They're led by their coach, Thomas Hammock, who doesn't have that same bowl experience. He's only coached in one bowl game, and that is the 2021 Cure Bowl, where his Northern Illinois team got blown out by Coastal Carolina, 47-21. And Northern Illinois has not been good in its bowl games as of late. They've lost their last 7 bowl games. They were on a 7-game losing streak when it comes to bowl season. However, we do want to note that their last win in bowl season was ironically over Arkansas State in the 2012 GoDaddy.com Bowl. So interesting thought there. So Arkansas State, they are actually the favorites in this one. They are favorited over Northern Illinois. So let's dive into this. What's the scenario for Arkansas State to win this bowl game? And what's the scenario for Northern Illinois to come out and win this bowl game? So it's no secret that it's been a grind for Butch Jones at Arkansas State. But we are starting to see that success starting to kick in. Arkansas State was a program that was consistently in bowl games. They were consistently contenders for the Sun Belt for years. They went to 9 straight bowl games from 2011 to 2019. But the former model of consistency just hit the fan like ever since COVID. And now Butch Jones finally got this turned around. And one thing that did change between this season and the last few years was their schedule actually did get a little bit easier. We think about the Oklahoma and Memphis games and how they got absolutely crushed in some of those games. But Arkansas State was essentially a team that they're the type of team that wins when they're supposed to, but when they're the underdogs, they don't take care of business, if that makes sense. Against mediocre opponents in the Sun Belt, they're able to find a way to win those games. They even found a way to put up 77 against a good Texas State squad. That is the one exception to that. So now Butch Jones had a shot to finally pull off a winning record in Jonesboro. It would feel like a huge momentum boost if they can actually get this win. However, Arkansas State, for them to win, they are going to have to win in shootout fashion because their defense, it's a little bit questionable to be nice about it. There's no, we're going to control the clock with this style of offense. But, you know, when this attack is working, and it's worked quite a few times this year, watch out. It's a fun team to watch, albeit a frustrating team to watch sometimes. Because it's about whether or not this offense can crank up the yards or not. Because Arkansas State, when they're able to put up more than 425 yards, They are 6-0, but when they can't reach that benchmark, they're 0-6. So it's kind of a feast or famine type of thing. Kind of like a J.R. Smith of college football, if that makes sense. Because when J.R. Smith was hot back in his NBA days, boy was he on fire. But boy, he was also ice cold some nights too. And it's the same thing with this Arkansas State offensive attack. When it works, it really does work. But when it doesn't work, oh baby, it's hard to watch. It's a Sarah McLachlan special. It's just bad out here. Um, but even with a struggling defense, if that offensive attack can get going, it'll be difficult for Northern Illinois to keep up. Now, Northern Illinois, they are going to be missing most of their better receivers. Injuries, actually, more so than the transfer portal. So, Northern Illinois, if it gets into a shootout, they don't have the firepower to put up a ton of points, or at least we don't think they do. Just because they haven't just doesn't mean they can't, but it's hard to see, or at least they didn't do that on a regular basis. But for Northern Illinois, the underdogs, the good news is that Northern Illinois does have a defense that is good enough to hold up in this particular scenario. On the defensive side of the ball, it actually didn't have a big problem with the transfer portal. It's a very put together unit at the moment. And their starting 11 is actually relatively solid. And they'll be looking at their defense to dictate the tempo of this game. And unlike Arkansas State as well, Northern Illinois is more than happy to rely on that running game and run on the clock, own the offensive narrative, and then turn over to the secondary, who is one of the most productive in the entire country. Now, Arkansas State, they can certainly run this football. There's no secret about it. Again, with the wins, when the production is there, when Arkansas State is running the ball more than 116 yards, they are 6-0. But here's the thing. Northern Illinois secondary is actually pretty darn good. It should be able to take away the deep shots, and it'll likely keep the Red Wolves to under 60% completion percentage. And that's important because if that passing attack is inconsistent, it allows you to load up on the box a little bit and make it harder for Arkansas State to establish that running game early and often. So then, instead of Northern Illinois having to play the Arkansas State style, it's the opposite way around. It's Northern Illinois. They're going to want to run the ball 40 times, keep those chains moving, and that shouldn't be an issue against an Arkansas State defense that's gave up 180 yards on the ground. And also, huge key here, third downs. You got to look at the third downs. The Huskies are a far different team when they are connecting on at least 40% of their third downs. If they're able to win third downs, get at least 40% of your third down conversions, you're 4-0. And when you're moving the chains on third downs, you're also demoralizing the other team. You're keeping them on the field. You're making them a little bit more tired. And Arkansas State has struggled with third down defense. They've allowed teams to convert 41% of the time. So, while Arkansas State is favored, the offensive consistency does worry me here a little bit. So, we look at this game, and we're actually going to disagree with the model in this regard with Camellia Bowl. I think because Northern Illinois is a more consistent team, and I think they're going to be more likely able to come out and establish their brand of football versus Arkansas State's establishing their brand of football. We will disagree with the model in this regard because the model has Arkansas State -4, Vegas is -3. We're going to go against both Vegas and our model in this regard. We're going to go with Northern Illinois not only to cover that 3-point spread. I think Northern Illinois actually pulls off a slight upset here. And the Huskies of Northern Illinois, I think they win it out. And they'll be winners of the Camellia Bowl. But it should be a very interesting game from a stylistic standpoint to see which style can prevail in the long term. So that takes us out of the noon games, and we've been blessed with two more games right after that. The next two games we're going to talk about are both 3:30 kickoffs that are going to be on the way. ABC and ESPN, man, they are getting some love on Saturday for the college football fans. I'll tell you what. We'll start with the game that is going to be on ABC at 3:30, and this game is going to be your Armed Forces Bowl down in Fort Worth, Texas. I believe this is like TCU Stadium that hosts this bowl game. Battle of two very good group of five teams going to duke it out. You got Air Force, who at one point was a team that could have been in that New Year's Six bowl conversation, but they did fade late in the regular season. Air Force, unfortunately, in the month of November, was certainly not their friend by any means. Air Force, after starting 8-0, they have dropped their last four games. Two of those four games were decided by double digits. So Air Force is coming in on a 4-game losing streak, and they're coming to play against a James Madison team. A James Madison team that honestly should have been a conversation for a New Year's Six bowl, if we're being honest with ourselves. This James Madison team absolutely deserved to have a bowl appearance. And I'm so glad that they were able to get a bowl appearance, courtesy of there not being enough 6-win teams out there. It should have also been allowed to play for a Sun Belt championship. I think they would have beaten Troy if they were allowed to do that. But that's just the tough reality of being in that probationary period. James Madison will be done with that after this year. But after all the screaming, all the politics, and all of the the politics were interesting. Like James Madison, remember when they had like Virginia Republicans and Democrats try to get the NCAA to remove the restrictions on James Madison? Like, you know how down bad wrong you have to be for Republicans and Democrats to agree on anything? Do better, NCAA. You'll have to do better. Now, James Madison will be without their head coach. Curt Canetti, he is no longer going to be at James Madison. He is off to Indiana and is going to take a few of his assistants as well. So his coaching staff is not going to be completely put together. But they will surprisingly have their quarterback, Jordan McCloud. Now, Jordan McCloud is in the transfer portal. He's going to be likely not with James Madison after this season. But Jordan McCloud, he's a man of his word. He's going to stick with his team. He's going to play with his guys one last time. Then after that, he's going to go off to the transfer portal. So Jordan McCloud is going to play in this game, and they're going to need everybody. They're going to need everybody. Air Force is more than just that nasty running game. It's no secret what Air Force wants to do. They're a military academy. Military academies and the triple option, it's like burgers and fries. They just go together. It just makes sense. And so if you're James Madison, you know what you need to do. Running is everything for Air Force. Despite their name, they don't go to the air very often. If Air Force is able to run the ball for more than 240 yards, they're a shoo-in to win their game. However, many times in these last 4 games, 3 of their last 4 games, they haven't been able to do that. It's a team that has to average 5 yards to carry. They have to control the clock, and they have to find a way to make a dent in the, at least statistically, one of the best run defenses in the country. Because James Madison, oh baby, James Madison is not just good at stopping the run, it's at a historically great level. The last time we've seen something like this is 2021. That Wisconsin Badgers team, their whole season, they allowed just 61 rushing yards a game. And no one else in the past 15 years has came close to that. But here's James Madison right there with him, allowing just 61.5 yards a game coming into the bowl game. And only two teams have gone past 100 yards all year, Old Dominion and Georgia State, but that's it. That is all. That is the only two teams that have been able to actually get 100 yards on the ground. And Georgia State is the only team that average more than 3.2 yards a carry. So Air Force, we know what their strength is. Run the ball. But James Madison is strong at that. So how does Air Force even pull this off? Because Air Force it's banged up, it's struggling, it's totally lost its consistency that brought them to that 8-0 start in the first place. And now they're playing a James Madison team that is specifically built to stop the one thing on offense that Air Force can do. And it's a shame because this is a really good program at Air Force. This is a program that has won 28 games and been and won 2 bowl games over the last 3 years. And if you throw out that weird COVID season, there's a chance they could have made it 40 wins and 40 bowl victories over the last 4 full seasons. This Air Force team, listen, the guys that wear that Air Force uniform, they know how to fight through adversity and still find a way to produce. That's what that program is all about, producing young leaders that are going to lead our Air Force someday. So if you're Air Force, you got to find a way to to beat that James Madison front seven. You got to be clean with your penalties. You can't turn the ball over. And at the very least, with Air Force dealing with these injuries, they do have a chance to heal up over these past few weeks. And they get those extra bowl practices as well. The team has also won when their run defense is swarm, so Air Force knows how to stop the run on their own too. But I just look at this game. I mean, I don't know. Part of me wants to really pull for Air Force. I really does. But at the same time, no. At the same time, I have a difficult time seeing Air Force dominate in the ground game. And I think because of that, the spread is incredibly low on this game, right? It's at 1.5. This could turn to a splattering. It really could, because they're gonna be ready offensively. James Madison is. I don't know if I can say the same for Air Force. So really not much of a discussion here. I think James Madison is going to win pretty comfortably. And because the spread is so darn even, we think they're going to cover pretty comfortably as well. We're not going to give that a lot of thought. Might be a best bet. You might have to wait till after at the very end when we reveal those best bets. But the other 3:30 game that we have is actually going to be on ESPN. I think this is, for the people, this is probably one of the best early bowl games out there. Just respectively from the meme standpoint, strictly from the meme standpoint, because the winning coach of his bowl game gets doused in French fries. Like, that sounds like paradise to me, especially if it's warm French fries. Like, imagine eating what just got dumped on you. If it's warm, of course. We don't advocate for eating cold French fries, of course, but we got the Idaho famous potato bowl. If you haven't figured it out yet, we talked about Georgia State briefly and their ability to run the ball. One of 2 teams to actually run decently against James Madison. And Georgia State, they are in a bowl game themselves. They're going to be taking on the Aggies of Utah State. Both of these teams coming in with 6-6 records to their name. And both of these teams are looking to not only finish on a high note for the season in general, but both teams are really trying to cement themselves and build towards 2024, particularly Utah State. Utah State is hot right now. They won 3 of their last 4 games in order to be here in the first place. Georgia State, on the other hand, they've been down horrendous. They have lost 5 consecutive games, and of those 5 games, only one of them was close. It was that Old Dominion game in the regular season finale. They lost to Old Dominion 25-24. But after that, their other 4 games that they lost, James Madison included, they ended up getting crushed by double digits. So it's been rough for Georgia Southern this month of November. Utah State is rolling. So that being said, famous Idaho Potato Bowl. We'll start with the Georgia State Panthers. How can they finally break this 5-game losing streak? Because Georgia State was rolling right along. They were 6-1. There was some conversations about Georgia State being ranked, and then they got blown out by Georgia Southern and James Madison, and Appalachian State, and LSU, among that Old Dominion game that I was talking about earlier. Big reason why they were so down horrendous those last 4 games, 2 things. Turnovers were part of the problem, but their schedule got harder. I mean, this is a Georgia State team. It's a good team. Don't get me wrong. It's a good team with great offensive balance and good coaching, but the team played 9 straight bowl teams over the last 9 games, and their defense didn't have a prayer against the better attacks come November. So how is that a good thing? How could this be seen as a possible good thing? I mean, because they're going up against a bowl team in Utah State themselves. Well, while Utah State is here in bowl season, all of their losses, 6 losses to be exact, they are against bowl teams on its schedule, and 4 of those losses were by 10 points or more. So while Utah State is in a bowl game, they have not beaten anybody that is also in a bowl game. So if there was a time for Georgia State to get its groove back, it could be in this particular game right here, but it does need to be stronger on 3rd downs. Utah State has struggled on both sides of the ball on those money downs. So if Georgia State, both sides of the ball, wins those 3rd down battles, it gives yourself a big opportunity to at least have a distinct advantage in this game. Another thing for Georgia State is they need to play clean football. They've been very undisciplined during their losing streak, and there's a massive turnover problem as well. They have turned the ball over twice or more than twice in 8 of their last 10 games. So you got to be clean with your penalties, and you got to take good care of the football. I think that's really important for Georgia State. And because outside of the Georgia Southern game, the offense worked, but their turnovers been killer. The team won when the ground attack was great. And the Panthers, well, they didn't have a rushing offense of Air Force or Boise State, 2 teams that ripped the Aggie defense to shred. But there's enough decent options there for Georgia State to push for at least 200 yards on the ground. And if you do that and you assume that Utah State, you can get 2 penalties or 2 turnovers and 7 penalties, then you could win this game. But that's the problem. Even with those positive aspects, you're assuming that Utah State is going to turn the ball over multiple times and that Utah State is going to be undisciplined themselves. But here's the thing. Georgia State is going to be missing guys in this game. Utah State, however, you can't say that about them. For the most parts, they're getting out of all of this transfer portal craziness unscathed. Now, it's not like they're still not going to have concerns. They're a 6-6 team for a reason. Quarterback consistency, for example. The quarterback consistency has been a huge issue for this team. But Georgia State, they will have some important parts in the transfer portal, especially in their secondary and their running backs. Marcus Corral, their lead rusher, in transfer portal, going to Missouri. So let's say they get that quarterback consistency. Let's say it's a hit more than a miss. This offense can put up some points on the board if you're Utah State. They are number 1 in the Mountain West in total offense. They're number 2 in scoring. And they actually do have good balance. They have a good ground game that really helped take over late in the year that helped propel this Utah State team to win 3 of their last 4 games. Their defense isn't anything special. Solid, it's solid, but it's not good or great per se. Their offensive line has had a hard time against anyone with a pass rush, but when this offense is able to get a groove and go their style of football, and they like to go fast, Georgia State wouldn't be able to hang on, but defenses in general couldn't hang on in general. Utah State, when they get to 400 yards or more, they're able to go 6-2. And listen, Utah State, they actually did go up against James Madison. They put up 500 on that James Madison defense. They didn't win the game, but man, did James Madison had a run for their money against this Utah State offense. It can move the ball. It's a problem. So we considering that Utah State is going to be at full strength and Georgia State isn't, and the fact that we're kind of assuming that Georgia State is going to have to force multiple turnovers and Utah State to kind of shoot themselves in the foot, I think it's pretty easy where we want to go here. I think we're going to rock with Utah State here in this Idaho Potato Bowl, and we're going to pick them to win, and I think we're going to pick them to cover, but I would not be surprised if Georgia State wins. Georgia State is a solid team themselves, but I think Utah State is going to take decent care of the ball. I think they're going to come out more prepared, more disciplined. So I think from that standpoint, Utah State, we're going to have them win this Idaho Potato Bowl. All right, so we are back. I had to go get a haircut real quick, get ourselves nice and cleaned up, all of that good stuff. So if we're looking a little bit different in the second half of the podcast, that is exactly why that is the case. But that being said, we still have a few bowl games that I definitely wanted to get into, all happening on this Saturday night. How about 7 o'clock Eastern? We got a good one on ESPN. We have the 68 Ventures Bowl that is going to pit the Southern Alabama Jaguars out of the Sun Belt Conference, taking on another MAC team, the Eastern Michigan Eagles. South Alabama, they are going to be looking for their very first bowl win in its program history. They've been to 3 bowl games in the past, and they have lost all 3 of their bowl games so far. Eastern Michigan, on the other hand, has been playing at the Division I level a little bit longer, but not much bowl history. Eastern Michigan is a team that is going to their 7th bowl game, and as a program, they are 2-4 in these bowl games. This is one of the few games that actually has a pretty lopsided line. The only line that I've seen in bowl season that's a little bit more lopsided than this particular bowl game is the Fiesta Bowl between Liberty and Oregon. So you have a line as big as it is, particularly in postseason action. Why is that? Why is this much more lopsided than the other bowl games that we have out here? Well, this South Alabama team, while it's not the same alliteration as last year's team was a little bit more consistent. This is still a very good team. The problem with South Alabama, though, is that South Alabama, you really don't know what you're going to get from a week-to-week basis. I mean, just look at what happened in the early portion of the season. We're talking about a team that was steamrolled by Tulane. They then parlay that into the next week. They blow out Oklahoma State. And that Oklahoma State turned out to be a good team. That Oklahoma State team ends up going to the Big 12 championship. And what do they do the next week after that? They lose to Central Michigan. It's a head-scratching loss, only to then turn around and get James Madison to the brink. They almost pulled off against James Madison. So what is this Southern Alabama team? Well, it's a Southern Alabama team that knows how to blow out the bad teams. They know how to at least hold firm against the good ones, but not always the most consistent team. So you'll have all of that going on. But even in this inconsistency that is South Alabama football, there is one factor that's always been the same. They know how to play a solid level of defense week in and week out. And that is especially apparent when going up against the run. And that was one area that they seem to hold form throughout the year. And you would figure, and then in addition to that, if South Alabama figures out how to get its ground going, they're able to win games if they're able to establish that vaunted running game. 6 of their wins this year came when they ran for over 190 yards on the ground, but they also ran for 160 yards or less in their losses as well. Same thing when it comes down to turnovers. If South Alabama takes good care of the football, they're going to be fine. They turned the ball over 4 times in their 6 wins. However, they turned the ball 15 times in their 6 losses. So if you're South Alabama, to avoid being upset, it's pretty straightforward. Run the ball decently. Don't turn the ball over yourself. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. And it should set up nicely for Eastern Michigan because Eastern Michigan is awful against the run. So if you're Eastern Michigan, you're a 3-possession underdog. You have to get turnovers to win this game. That's really what it barrels down to. You need some turnovers to happen. Good news is that it's a relatively good defense when it comes down to doing just that. Because I'll tell you what, there is a ton of flaws in this Eagles team. There isn't enough of a pass rush. Their offense was among the worst in America. There's no downfield passing game whatsoever. And again, make an attempt to run this defense, and you'll have a whole lot of fun. It's a straight up good time. However, they are 3-0 when they took the ball away 3 times or more, and they have came up with multiple turnovers in 6 games. This is a really coached team, even though they may not have the talent level of many teams that are participating in the bowl season. This is ironically also a golden era of Eastern Michigan football. I know that's really weird to say because they're only 6-6, but the history of Eastern Michigan football is not something that is a nightly dinner conversation with the kids. But this program knew nothing but pain and torture year after year. From 1990 to 2016, they have been to a grand total of 6 bowls in 49 years of existence. Chris Creighton, the current coach of his Eastern Michigan squad, he's personally responsible for 5 of them. They're a team that does not have a lot of penalties. The turnovers aren't a big issue. And then if you get your running game going and your mid-range throws are actually clicking, this could become an interesting game. So, but in saying that, it's one of those things where Eastern Michigan kind of has to hope that South Alabama shoots itself in the foot and Eastern Michigan has to capitalize on these opportunities. That being said, with Eastern Michigan being a well-coached team overall, I will give Chris Creighton the benefit of the doubt in this particular situation. We'll say that we think they'll cover. It should be a pretty, not easy cover, but, it has to be a bloodbath for South Alabama to cover this. And while South Alabama will have the much better team on paper, they're playing practically at home in Mobile. We're going to say Eastern Michigan covers because they are a well-coached team, and we're not necessarily sure which South Alabama team is going to show up. So we're going to disagree with the model from that particular standpoint because the model has South Alabama winning in a bloodbath, a splattering, so to speak. But what we will also say on top of that, though, is I do think South Alabama is too much for Eastern Michigan. So while we will acknowledge that Eastern Michigan probably should cover the 17.5, we think that South Alabama will win outright. It would be a major surprise, in my opinion, if Eastern Michigan is actually somehow able to pull this off. But we'll go ahead and take a trip out onto the West Coast now, because we have a 7:30 matchup that's going to take place on ABC. A little bit of that staggered start action as we get into the late night. Because the next bowl game that we have on tap is that Las Vegas Bowl. It's presented by SRS Distribution. Now, this bowl game pits Utah and Northwestern, and it's kind of the opposite in terms of expectations. Northwestern was expected to be terrible this year. We got to say it how it is. After their head coach was fired, Northwestern was predicted by many people to be one of the worst Power 5 teams in America. The Colorado before Deion Sanders, if you look at it from that lens. It was so bad that I remember very early in the season, Northwestern was an underdog to UTEP. Yeah, I'm going to say that real slow. Make sure y'all heard me carefully. There was a time this season where UTEP was an actual betting favorite over Northwestern. That's what Vegas had. Not what I had, but that's what Vegas had. Crazy stuff out there, for sure. But then Northwestern, they just find ways to win. And they have. That's why they're 7-5. That's why they're here in a bowl game. They're much better than what they've been able to be predicted to go. And I'm actually kind of surprised that David Braun didn't get more love for the coaching job that he's been able to do. Now, on the opposite side, for Utah, you could argue that this has been a little bit of a lost year. Utah has these expectations of possibly competing for a college football playoff spot. Utah has these expectations to compete for a Pac-12 championship. Neither of those things happen, and a big reason for that, in my opinion, was because they didn't have their leader on offense, Cam Rising. He'll be back next year, but for the sake of this particular bowl game, not going to happen. So, in spite of all that, in spite of Northwestern trending in a positive direction and Utah being in the negative direction, it seems like, still Utah is favored. Well, let's go ahead and see the why in terms of why Utah is favored over Northwestern. We'll talk about the underdogs here and talk about what the underdogs could and will need to do in order to have a chance to win this Las Vegas Bowl game, even though they are underdogs. Because for Northwestern, like I said, this could have been another lost year. Because what's been kind of forgotten was just the black cloud that was over based off of the hazing investigation that happened with Pat Fitzgerald and all that other stuff. But David Braun has stepped in. He was on in the same staff as Pat Fitzgerald. He's actually steadied the ship. It's actually really inspiring to see what he's been able to accomplish, even with everything that's been happening around this program in the previous offseason. The turnovers have stopped. The defensive front actually played at a higher level, particularly against the run, and they pulled off some shockers. They had a massive comeback against Minnesota. They stunned Maryland. Shoot, they even pushed the Iowa Hawkeyes to the brink, and that's a team that had no business being in the Big Ten championship. I am happy that the Big Ten is getting rid of divisions after this year. At the same time, though, Iowa did end up winning Big Ten West for all the memes that came from it. And then they also had this run of wins against Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois. There might be a whole slew of problems, and it's going to take Utah messing up, right? This is more about Utah shooting itself in the foot, a requisite a number of times, more so than Northwestern coming out and winning this game from Utah. But Northwestern can also give itself a shot if their running game is merely functional. They're a team that's 6-1 when they're running for 90 yards or more. Because what Northwestern has is they do have a veteran quarterback in Ben Bryant, who's had experience starting at Eastern Michigan and Cincinnati as well. He knows how to start. He's played a lot of college football. So they have a quarterback back there that is not going to be the reason why the team loses very often. Also, the Utes have very little to no downfield passing game. And like Northwestern, they have to run the ball to win. They went 2-4 when running for over 120 yards, but they were Utah's undefeated when running for 220 or more. It's very feast or famine when it comes to that Ute offense. Northwestern has allowed 220 rushing yards just 3 times. So again, you contain Utah and with their front seven, you have a chance. But this could be one of those more defensive minded games because Utah's defensive front has the ability to take over right away. And for Utah to win, they got to get an advantage on Northwestern's offensive line immediately. While the Northwestern offensive line isn't nearly as bad as last year, it's still awful in pass protection. And it also doesn't generate a steady push for their ground attack. They're 7-5 for a reason. They're inconsistent offensively, like many teams in the Big Ten West. Utah will also make it very difficult for Northwestern to run the ball. They are fourth in the nation against the run, and they did this playing in a very good Pac-12 conference. We have as the second best league in the nation this year. And it also helps you have a solid pass rush coming from several spots. And I mean, that's Utah football in a nutshell. The defense is always going to be great. Coach Whittingham, he has a very good vision of what Utah football is all about. It's a defensive-minded program. It shows on Saturdays. The bigger issue for Northwestern, though, is going to be control. This isn't a fast attack, but it does prefer to work with a little bit of pace. On the flip side of that, though, Utah is number one in the country when it comes to time possession, and that's because of a defense that's amazing at holding up on third downs. So Utah, for all that it's worth, even without its primary offensive weapons, they also know how to go about controlling and dictating how the game is going to be played. So while Northwestern has been able to pull off some rallies in Minnesota and a near comeback against Iowa, overall, it's not built to mount a big comeback against a top defense. It's also not going to grind out long time consuming drives. So if you're Utah, all you got to do is make sure that your ground game is going fine. You get off to a solid start and you'll be fine. And because of that, I think Utah is in a good spot here. I do think Utah wins this game, and Utah is going to cover in this particular game as well. But do want to shout out the head coach of Northwestern, David Braun. He's done a very good job this year. This could have been a disaster of a football season, but it hasn't. And I think that speaks a lot to what David Braun's trying to do. Hopefully he can build on this going into 2024 with the Big Ten only getting tougher with those Pac-12 additions. And that leaves us with just one more bowl game. One more bowl game that we have on that Saturday night. It's 49 Owls out there, man. A 10:30 kickoff. Now, why is this kickoff so late? Well, that is because this game is happening out in the beautiful state of Hawaii. This is happening at Hawaii's football stadium in Clarence T.C. Ching Athletics Complex on Honolulu, Hawaii. Got a battle between a solid Sunbelt and a solid Mountain West team. We got Coastal Carolina and San Jose State getting ready to go at it here. And it should be interesting. Should be a fun one on our hands. San Jose is a 10-point favorite over Coastal Carolina. So just like in those other bowl games that we've been working through, let's go ahead and check out each of these teams. Coastal Carolina, a much more new program in terms of what they've been doing at the FBS level, but they've been doing okay in their bowl game appearances. They're 1-2. They also went bowling last year as well when they lost to Eastern Carolina in that Birmingham Bowl. 53-29 was that final score. Fun fact here, though, none of the 3 Coastal Carolina bowl games have combined for fewer than 71 points. So it's always been shootouts for Coastal Carolina when they've gotten into bowl season. However, San Jose State is a little bit more experienced when it comes to bowl games. However, Brent Brennan has not been able to finish his seasons on a high note yet. This is the third bowl game that Brent Brennan has taken San Jose State. He's lost his first two. Last one being the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, losing to Eastern Michigan 41-27. It was a good start for the Spartans in bowl history. They've won all 5 bowl appearances between 1990 and 2015, but they have been outscored in their last 2 bowl games. So San Jose State is the favorite, but how does Coastal Carolina pull this upset off? And this is not exactly the type of year that Tim Beck wanted to have at Coastal Carolina. This is his first year as the coach at Coastal Carolina, because their former coach Jamie Chadwell did move on and take on the Liberty job, and he's been doing great things at Liberty. Has led Liberty to an unbeaten season and a berth to the New Year's Six Bowl. Heights that Coastal Carolina has never been able to reach under his tenure. They're still in a bowl game. It's a solid campaign, and going to Hawaii to finish your year out, beautiful Hawaii, when it could be crappier around the country, it's hardly anything to be upset about. But I'm sure Tim Beck would be the first to tell you that they didn't necessarily live up to expectations. That being said, the Chanticleers might have to get a little bit creative when it comes to how they're going to generate their offense, right? Because Coastal Carolina, they don't have the benefit of their starting quarterback playing in this particular game. San Jose State will. And the reason why they might have to be a little bit more creative in terms of trying to build some offense is because their starting quarterback, Grayson McCall, did enter the transfer portal. Now, this is ironically the second time he's entered the transfer portal while at Coastal Carolina, but this time it's serious. He has found a new home at North Carolina State. So yeah, the quarterback situation might be a little bit questionable there. We could see possibly a Jarrett Guest play. He's a senior who's been on this Chanticleers team for 5 years now, and he's played in spots. He's been solid in his senior year, but we haven't seen him with many reps. He only has 127 pass attempts throughout the course of his 5 seasons there at Coastal Carolina. We could see him. However, regardless of who starts at the quarterback position for the Chanticleers, the offense isn't going to change that much, at least not dynamically change. It's still going to get its runners in space, rely on a efficient passing game, and try to keep those turnovers to a minimum. Because one thing that is extremely important for Coastal Carolina, they cannot afford having mistakes, at least when it comes to turning the football over. When they turn the ball over 3 times or more, they are 0-3. So keep your turnovers to a minimum. You can give yourself a shot to pull this upset off. In addition, this defense could also make up for possibly the lack of fertility on offense by getting some big plays of its own. They got to be able to get pressure off its quarterback, because if the Coastal Carolina defense can hold up and they can just play complementary football, again, you got a chance. And this running game is going to be critical for the Chanticleers. When they run for 170 yards or more, they're 5-0 as a team. 7-1 when they get up to 110. So bare minimum, get to 100 yards on the ground. That's not a big ask whatsoever for Coastal Carolina. And it's important that their run game gets going, because San Jose State, they are dangerous in a whole lot of ways. While they're not very good at stopping the run, they've allowed 173 yards this year. So they're not a great run defense type of team. But what San Jose State is good at doing is San Jose State, one, they know how to go out and put up a bunch of yards. They have an excellent balance offensively. Their ground game has been fantastic. They've ran for over 200 yards in 5 of the last 6 games in their winning streak, and San Jose State is certainly hot. They have a very hot quarterback as well. Their quarterback being Condiero. Condiero, efficient year overall, 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions to his name. He's been hot. 13 touchdowns, 1 pick during that 6-game winning streak. He's also great at keeping the chains moving. Time possession battle should be in San Jose State's favor. And there's also a familiarity factor in that, well, one, Condiero grew up in Honolulu and actually played at Hawaii before transferring. And the team has also done this before. They've made the trip out to Honolulu before they play Hawaii in the Mountain West. They traveled there at the end of October. They won 35-0. Plus, their defense specializes in takeaways, takeaways, and takeaways. The Spartans don't give the ball away, but their defense does an incredible job of making things easier by forcing tons of mistakes. They came up with 11 takeaways in the last 4 games. And Coastal Carolina, we know that when they turn the ball over, they're in a bad spot. So, all things considered, I like the matchup for San Jose State. We got a kid coming home, grew up in Hawaii, played at Hawaii briefly, been to Hawaii Stadium already, knows what the travel is like. And Coastal Carolina, they have to make a much farther trip out. So the best thing that we might have for Coastal Carolina is their dance team. They posted a picture on Twitter, which they deleted later on, but it's them like celebrating on Hawaii's beaches with their dance squad and with the mascot and the head coach. I didn't see nothing wrong with it, but I could be a little bit biased in that sense. But I like San Jose State here. I think San Jose State's in a great spot. I think they win, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also covered as well. Really interested to see how Tim Beck handles the absence of Grayson McCall, but I think San Jose State, they're hot, and I think they continue that here in the bowl season as well. So that is actually all the bowl games that I wanted to take care of. But there is one more thing that I really wanted to do before signing off tonight. I wanted to have a full-on segment of the good old-fashioned best bets of college football weekend. We're going to actually have a full one. We're actually going to have 4 bets that I really like and that I really enjoy. So last time I came on here, I only had 2 bets. We did UTSA minus 11.5. That covered. But then the Syracuse game happened. They did not cover. They did not cover that minus 1.5 at all. So we're 1 for 2. It's fine, but we weren't great necessarily, right? Let's see if we can go 4 for 4 this week. And spend some time thinking about it. I'm looking at multiple things. Actually, 2 of these 4 bets are going to involve the Armed Forces Bowl. So we'll cover those first. We got James Madison minus 1.5. I think James Madison could steamroll Air Force, especially if James Madison does get off to a hot start. And I also feel at the same time that the over for this Armed Forces Bowl at 40.5, I feel like that's a little bit on the small side. I think that this has some value for sure. And I think this, while it might not be a shootout per se, I do think that James Madison helps push it over that 40.5 ultimately. But Air Force could make it interesting as well. So that's 2 of the 4 best bets right there. I'm also looking in another direction in the sense of the over in the Birmingham Bowl. It's only at 44.5. I think Troy's offense can get going here with Duke not having its head coach. They might not have the same identity. They might not be as motivated defensively. Running the ball travels. I think running the ball travels no matter where you go. This feels like a home game, and I feel like Troy's going to be able to dictate the pace a little bit more. So we are also going with the over here at 44.5. And finally, we're going to wrap things up. We got the Spartans of San Jose State. We just talked about it earlier. We like that minus 9.5. I'm going to go ahead and roll with that. And guys, this is going to be my 4 best bets for this week. So what's happening after this? Well, we're still gonna have more games to cover down the line. Over the course of the next 8 days, we're gonna have not just these 7 bowl games, but 19 more bowl games. So we might be a little bit more rapid fire here for the next couple of podcasts, but I'm excited for it. I'm ready to take on the challenge for sure. And hopefully you guys have been enjoying the bowl season, not just watching some quality football, but spending time with your family and loved ones, whoever gives you peace in your personal life. But we're gonna sign off for tonight. And I hope you enjoyed this full pod. I hope you enjoy our coverage of these bowl games, just giving each individual bowl game, that love and affection that it deserves. If you've been enjoying that, would love it if you hit that like button, because in that like button does help us out tremendously. It does get us out to more of you guys out in the YouTube algorithm every time you hit that like button, and it only takes a couple of seconds to do that. Speaking of things that also take a couple of seconds, hit that subscribe button if you're brand new. You have a real opportunity to be an A1 since day one, and just love your company. We accept everybody, no matter what of a fan you type you are, whether you're a more casual fan or maybe you're a more diehard fan, whether you root for my favorite team, like the Cincinnati Bearcats, or you root for some other team. Everyone is welcome, everyone is appreciated. So come join the community. Doing so, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, man. So that being said, I'm gonna sign off. We got the Gasparilla Bowl tonight between Georgia Tech and UCF. Excited for that bowl game. Hope you guys are as well. Until then, I hope you guys are all out there having a good one. I am your host, Jake, and this is me saying good night, everybody.